Hey guys, it's Chris from Highline Guitars, and you're watching another episode of From the Luthier's Workbench. In today's episode, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about the why and how of installing a Tune-O-Matic bridge so that it's recessed into the body. And we'll start out by talking about the why. Why would I do this? What is the purpose of recessing a Tune-O-Matic bridge into a guitar body? Well, with this particular guitar, and this is one of my Highline Bravo designs, the neck is installed flat relative to the body of the guitar. And that's because most of the bridges that I use on my guitars are Fender style bridges, whether they're hardtail or tremolo. And because of that, you can keep the neck flat relative to the body. When you use a Tune-O-Matic bridge, however, it's usually necessary to install the neck at a slight angle to the body. And that means the nut and headstock are actually lower than where the heel is. And the reason that you have to do that is because with a Tune-O-Matic bridge, the strings at the bottom of the string, the distance between the bottom and the frets is higher than it is with a Fender style bridge. So, and even when you lower the bridge all the way down to the body, there's still, the action is still too high. So to get the action lower, you have to lower the headstock and the nut relative to the heel. So it has to be at an angle. And that angle is usually anywhere from 1.5 to 4.5 degrees, depending on the design of the guitar and the bridge. So for this particular build, I decided I wanted to use a Tune-O-Matic, pretty much just because I thought it would be kind of fun to, a nice change. And I have kind of a love-hate with Tune-O-Matics. I always felt like the Tune-O-Matic bridge was, when it was patented, it was kind of rushed into patented without refining the design. And there are some issues with the Tune-O-Matic. But what I do like about the Tune-O-Matic is it's such a clean, streamlined, simple design. And so I thought I would go ahead and kind of develop a process for installing Tune-O-Matics on my guitars while leaving the neck flat. Now there are some options that you can consider when going the Tune-O-Matic route with a guitar that has a neck that's supposed to be flat. One is that you can shim the neck so that it actually goes down at an angle. However, in this case, I couldn't do that because the neck was carved to transition nicely into the body. And when you change that angle from flat to, a couple of degrees, that changes the geometry where the neck meets the body. So what I'd have to do is I would have to restructure some of that area. I'd have to recarve it and resand it and do all that. And I just didn't really want to bother with doing that. Another thing that you can do is you can actually grind the backside of the Tune-O-Matic down to make the bridge shorter in height. And that way you can install it, right on the flat surface. And there's a couple of problems with that. First of all, it depends on the bridge itself. Some bridges you can't do that because the way that they are assembled, they use steel clips that hold the screws in. And if you grind off too much of that bottom edge, you could also destroy those clips, and that makes the bridge fall apart. The other problem is when you grind down the bridge to make it shorter in height, when you install it onto the posts will stick up out of the bridge, which is going to look awkward and it's going to feel uncomfortable to play. So you just have to kind of be aware of that. In this case, I decided, however, I would recess the bridge down into the body so that I could bring the strings down lower to the frets. And that's going to require some routing on a guitar which has already been routed. Now, in the old days, when I used to build guitars entirely by hand, that process would involve making a template out of like an MDF board and cutting the area for that recess, as well as the holes for the string through, since I'm not using a stop tailpiece. Now, the problem with that is you gotta, because this is, first of all, this is a carved top guitar, so placing a template on there is gonna be kind of tricky. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to jig it so that the the template doesn't rock. And I've also got this neck, which has already been installed, and it's kind of in the way. So, you can see where I'd have these issues. But when you go that route, you have to consider the time it's going to take to make the template, to set everything up, and then to actually route it. For this particular guitar, since I use CNC machine to make most of my guitars, I opted to use the CNC machine to cut the cavity and to do the string through holes. And that meant I had to start out by creating a digital template. So in a sense, I'm still using a template. It's just virtual. Now let's go jump on the computer and I'll show you kind of what I did. To create a virtual template, the first thing I did was I opened up my original design file and I used that to figure out exactly where to place the bridge on the body. Then I eliminated all the elements that I didn't need and took the resulting file and brought it into Inventable's easel so that I could set up the tool paths for carving it with my CNC. To begin the carving process, the first thing I have to do is set the guitar body onto my wasteboard of my CNC machine. And I'll need to make sure that the center line of the body is parallel with the y-axis movement of the CNC machine. So I'll use a sharp pointer bit and I will move the router back and forth on the y-axis, making sure that the point follows the center line, which is marked by the edge of the tape. I'll have to raise and lower that sharpened bit several times and then jog the router back and forth to make sure that that center line is parallel with the y-axis before I can begin carving. Now, it's really important to make sure that that center line is parallel with the y-axis. So I'm going to take my time to make sure that that body is squared. And then once I'm satisfied that it is, I can tighten the clamps so that the body won't move later on as I'm carving out the recess. The home position for my router is going to be placed from a specific reference point, which in this case is along the edge of the pickup pocket where the center line intersects it. I'll then move the router 2.5 inches forward and remove that pointer bit. Then I'll raise the router and insert a spiral 2-flute upcut bit, which will do all of the cutting work. And then to find my z-axis 0 position, I'll lower the router until the very tip of that bit just kisses the surface of the guitar body. Then I'll raise the bit 0.1 inches and move it back 2.5 inches to the reference point. From this point, I can then move the router back 9 inches on the y-axis and then 7 inches to the left on the x-axis. Then I'll drop the router 0.1 inches and the router is homed and ready to start carving. After switching on the router, I sent the G-code file to the CNC machine and that began the cutting process. Now at first, the cut is shown at actual speed, but as you'll see here, it's going to speed up to 1,000 times normal speed. Now the actual cut will take a total of about 8 minutes to do. And what you see being cut now is the pocket that the bridge will sit down in. And this will be done in several passes. And once it's finished, the router will then begin boring the holes for the bridge posts. And then when that's finished, the router will then move further back and start cutting the holes for the string through ferrules in the top of the body. And then for the last hole, I return the speed back to normal. So this is how it finished drilling that last string through ferrule hole. And once that was done, the router then returns to home position and the cutting process is now complete. Now, even though I used a spiral upcut bit, the cut was pretty clean. I still, however, felt the need to just run a little bit of 220 grit sandpaper over the edge just to get rid of some of the little fuzzies that were left. And I'm not going to leave raw wood exposed, so I went ahead and applied the same stain that I used on the rest of the body, mixed with some water-based polyurethane to seal the wood. To ground the bridge, I drilled a hole from the post hole mount down into the control cavity. Then I took a length of ground wire with one end stripped and fed that through into the control cavity, leaving just the stripped end in the hole where I will be installing the post mount. And when I install the post mount, that's going to pinch the bare wire, the stripped end of the wire, between the body and that post mount. So the next step was to pound in the post mount, and I used a dowel to pound it all the way down into the bottom of the recess cavity. Finally, I screwed in the posts all the way down into the recess. And you'll notice that the thumb wheel portion of the post is actually not going to be accessible once the bridge is installed, but that's no big deal because the posts are slotted at the top and can be adjusted for height with a screwdriver. And that's how the bridge looks after it's installed. All right, guys, well, that is basically why I recessed a Tune-O-Matic bridge and then how I actually did it. And I realize not everybody else has a CNC machine, and you may have to use other techniques to do it. But I think really the main point of this video is there's really no reason why you can't recess a Tune-O-Matic bridge. It works just fine. So if it's something you've been thinking about and wondering if it's something maybe worth considering doing, absolutely. If you've got a guitar with a flat neck and you're not sure you're going to be able to get that the proper amount of string action with a Tune-O-Matic, I think recessing it is definitely a viable alternative. And just because I used a CNC machine doesn't mean you have to use a CNC. You can also use a router with an MDF template. It just may take a little bit longer to do the work. So hope that this video is informative, maybe inspirational, whatever. And if you liked it and you hope to see more videos on the same subject of building guitars, by all means, please hit that subscribe button. I'm about this close to 30,000 subscribers, which I think is awesome. And then you'll see that little bell icon that's next to the subscribe button. Click that and you'll be notified when I post a new video, which is usually about once a week. And of course, if you have any questions or comments, post them down below. I really do try to answer them when they pop up. And of course, I'd really love it if you gave me a thumbs up. Every little bit helps. So until the next episode, I hope you have a great weekend, great week ahead. And if you get some time to build guitars, definitely do so. Otherwise, pick one up, plug it in, and start playing. Take care.